Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Paloma Young, and I'm the coordinator in career and professional development.
And I'm Roxanne Fenton. I'm the manager in career and professional development, and we're here today to give you some tips for virtual presentations. Our goal is to give you the tools to create and present your ideas effectively in a virtual or online format. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about organizing your thoughts, making effective slides, choosing the best software for your presentation, working with your screens, whether you have one screen or two screens. We'll talk all about Zoom and how you can use Zoom effectively while you're presenting, especially how to rehearse, and we'll talk about how to wrap up your presentation. Let's start with organizing your thoughts, because this is where you should start with any presentation. You want to start with the audience. You have to know your audience to give a good presentation. So you want to think about who they are. What knowledge do you share? And what knowledge do you have as a presenter that your audience doesn't have that you need to be sure to give them? That goes into what do they know? You may have a shared context that's deep and you can draw on that shared context, or you may have to explain a lot. And finally, you should focus on what your audience should take away from your presentation. What do you want them to be able to do with the information that you're giving them? You want to make sure that your presentation has a central message and that you're focused on that message. Instead of moving simply from slide to slide, create a through line that connects everything together and then talk about that through line. In our case, the through line is how to do well in a virtual presentation, and everything we're saying relates back to that through line. You can also tell a story, and this can be a story in a very basic sense with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But your story is going to arc across all of your slides, connecting them together and drawing your listener in. Okay. To have a good presentation, you want to have effective slides. So let's talk about that. The key to having effective slides is to make sure that the slides follow the presentation. They enhance the presentation. They don't drive it. So start with an outline. Make sure you have the presentation as your key focus. I know it's exciting to dive into designing your slides sometimes, but you want to be sure again that the slides are serving your outline. One way to do an outline is to focus on your main points and the support or examples you're going to give to your main points. Another way to do an outline, if you're doing a story, is to think about the story events and the details that support or enhance those events. Keep the design of your slides simple. They're there, again, I've said it before, to enhance the presentation rather than drive it. So some of the simple things you can do: use large fonts. Even on a computer screen, small text can get hard to read for your audience. Use minimal text. You don't want to have large blocks of text filling up your slides because your audience is going to try to read them and they're not going to be listening to you. Similarly, you don't want to read those large blocks of text to your audience. It's okay if you're repeating some short text that you have on your presentation, but you should always be adding and doing more than the text on your slides. And then finally, something that's really important in the virtual realm is to avoid transition effects. A lot of the slide software gives you the option to have your slides dissolve or fade or wipe. But on Zoom or a similar platform, those transitions tend to lag, and instead of enhancing your presentation, they distract from it.
Now let's take a look at software choices. You want to make sure that you're creating your slides on a software platform that you do feel comfortable using. So some common programs are Google Slides, PowerPoint, and Keynote, and you want to make sure that you are comfortable with setting the presentation to present mode, which makes the presentation slides full screen. Each software is a little different, so just make sure that you know where that button is, and it could be helpful to practice going full screen a few times and clicking through the slides. And you can usually press the space bar on your keyboard or the arrows on your keyboard, or click the mouse directly on the slides to go to the next slide. So just practice a little bit and make sure you're feeling comfortable. And now let's consider how different it is working with one screen or with two screens. When you have one screen, for example, you only have your laptop and not a second monitor, a challenge that you could encounter could be where to keep your notes when you're presenting. Consider having your notes printed or on another device close by. And depending on what you're presenting, you could also have what you're sharing on the slides that are not the shared slides. So you have the option to share on Zoom. Just make sure you're not sharing your whole desktop and instead only selecting, for example, Google Chrome, if that's what you're using, or PowerPoint, and overlay your notes for your slides on top. It'll help to practice, maybe get a friend and see what they see. Just ask them some questions. Does it sound okay? Does it look okay? And that'll make you feel really confident. Another important thing to remember is do try your best to face the camera. If you are looking at the camera, it feels as if you're making eye contact with the audience, which can make it feel much more personal for them. Do also remember to turn off notifications so nothing distracting pops up on your screen while you're presenting. So when you have two screens, for example, a laptop connected to another monitor, you do have the advantage of having your notes a little more conveniently accessible. You don't have to cram everything on one screen, but you do have a little more to keep track of. So just make sure you're careful. You know where your notes are. You know that you are sharing the correct screen on Zoom, and just make sure you're practicing with this. You do want to do your best to face the camera again. Since you have two cameras, just make sure you know which one is recording you and face that one. And keep your notes close by. You can move them if you're using, for example, the notes function on the software. You can drag them close to the camera, or if you're using maybe Microsoft Word for some notes, drag them close to the camera if you can too. And again, turn off your desktop notifications so nothing distracting pops up. Now let's take a look at Zoom. You are probably a little familiar with Zoom at this point, but we'll just go over some basic tips so that you feel a little more comfortable. So the main ways to access your Zoom account as an Art Center student are you can use the Art Center account. So if you have any trouble accessing it, email AV and they'll help you. You should automatically have a Zoom account already. You could also use your personal account. So this is a free account, and if you'd like, you could sign up not with Art Center and just use your personal address. So that's how you get set up on Zoom. Now you also want to make sure that everything is looking good on Zoom. So pay attention to your lighting. You can see these examples here, bad lighting at the top, good lighting below. The bad lighting, this person is very dark. I can't see any of the facial features and the attention. I'm being drawn to the background instead of the foreground where the speaker is. The good lighting example is below. I can see the person, they look great. The light is coming from in front of their face rather than behind, so they're not backlit. Also make sure you're paying attention to your background, that there's nothing distracting. A plain white wall is perfectly fine. And if you're sharing any video, pay attention, try and make them shorter clips if you can. Sometimes it can lag when the audience is watching your video. So just try and make it short. And remember, you can share your sound. So when you share your screen, you'll see in this little example, it's on the bottom left-hand corner, that little share sound icon. So you can share the sound directly. It sounds much better when you do that. And then screen sharing. This is the most important step when it comes to presenting making sure you've selected the correct screen or desktop. So click the button and just make sure you know which one you've selected. It's okay if you take a second, read every one. If you've got a lot of windows, just take your time and select the correct one. Since you don't want to share anything by mistake, just try and share the correct one. And relax, practice, do a sound check. Everything will be perfectly fine as long as you've rehearsed. So keep track of your notes, breathe and relax, and you got this.
So let's talk a little about rehearsal. Rehearsal is really the key to feeling comfortable when you present and coming across confidently. Let's look at what rehearsal can do for you. As you rehearse, you can record yourself. This is a great thing about being in the virtual environment and having Zoom, is that you can use Zoom to record yourself so that you can watch it and play it back and understand what you're doing well and what's not working in your presentation. And we'll go over how to record yourself with Zoom in just a minute. Rehearsal is a repeating process. You don't just prepare your presentation, rehearse once, and you're good. Instead, you should outline your presentation, rehearse, think about what worked and what didn't work, revise your presentation, and repeat. This will get you to know your presentation really well, and it'll let you work out what's going well and what's not going well so that the whole thing goes well. You have a great resource on campus for rehearsing presentations. I know it's called the Writing Center, but the tutors at the Writing Center are also there to help you rehearse your presentations, and they will give you feedback. You can tell them what you're working on, whether you're working on the structure of your presentation, you're working on how you're using your voice, you're working on, is the technology working for you? Let them know when you make your appointment what kind of feedback you're looking for, and they can help you out with that. And you can contact the Writing Center and book an appointment through Inside Art Center. Okay, so how do you use Zoom to record yourself? The first thing you have to do is be able to launch your Zoom room so that you are the only one in it. And if you haven't done this before, there's two ways you can get to it. The first is through the Zoom website, and you go to zoom.us/sign-in and sign into your account. And then you'll see on the left-hand side the menu, and you pick meetings, then select personal room and click start, and that will launch you in your own Zoom room. The other way to do this is through the desktop app. If you have that downloaded, on the home page of the desktop app, just click new meeting, and that will launch you into your Zoom room. Once you're in the Zoom room, you'll see a much longer bar at the bottom with options, and you want to hit that record button to stop and start your recording. Once you've recorded yourself, you have to find it. And this you do have to do from the Zoom web interface, that zoom.us/sign-in. Once you're signed in, on the left-hand side, go to recordings, and it will list all of the recordings that you have. And you'll see here, we don't have any recordings, and it says that, but right in that same place, it would list your recording with the start time and the date. And you just click on that to get the link. All right, the last part of our presentation and the last part of your presentation should be wrapping it up. You need to bring your presentation to a close. Why is this important? Well, first of all, it's going to make the audience feel comfortable. If you just come to the end of your presentation and kind of stumble and say, oh, that's it, I'm done, your audience feels a little bit uncomfortable, and that ruins all the work that you've done in your presentation. So you want to let your audience know that it's time for the presentation to end in a smooth way. This also lets you make a good final impression and leaves the audience with a positive outlook on your overall presentation. You can help the audience remember the key things that you identified in your presentation, whether that's ideas about your work, the way you created a project, the key points that you wanted them to make. You can bring those back and help the audience remember what you consider important. You shape the audience's reception of your presentation when you do this. You direct their attention to the things in the presentation that you feel are most important. And finally, your wrap-up lets you open the door for further engagement. Maybe you're going to ask for questions. Maybe you're going to ask for feedback, and you want feedback on a particular aspect of your work. You can set that up when you wrap up your presentation. You can also share information about yourself, your contact info, as we'll be doing at the end of our presentation. So how do you wrap up? You can recap. You can go back over the key ideas or the key points that you presented in your presentation. You can pose questions. Maybe you want to leave the audience thinking about something, either because you want feedback on it or because that's what you want to leave the audience with, is something to think about. And you can also point to the future. You can say where you're going next with your work. Maybe your work has opened up some new possibilities that you want the audience to think about. Maybe you want to invite the audience to engage with you further in the future. Those are all ways of bringing it together. So let's bring our presentation together at the end. In this presentation, we've talked about a number of skills for you to develop while giving a virtual presentation. We talked about creating a through line, making sure your thoughts are organized so that everything in the presentation relates together and those connections are clear. We talked about making technology work for you as you put your slides together, choose the best software, and know how to work Zoom so that you feel very comfortable. Rehearsal brings confidence. That confidence comes with preparation. So remember to rehearse and use the tools you have, including Zoom recordings, to help you do that. Finally, wrap up your presentation to bring closure for you and the audience. And we'd like to invite you to engage with our office further. You can always email us at careers@artscenter.edu. You can find this recording and other workshops, as well as a whole host of other resources for your career development on our website at artscentercpd.com. And you can keep up with everything that's going on in our office by following us on Instagram at artscentercpd. Thank you so much today for your time and attention.